Good morning to one and all, and welcome to this morning's meditation session with Gerardo Abboud. My name's Owsley Brown, and I'm this year's Festival of Faith chairperson. I just wanted to quickly remind everybody that we have a great day in front of us today with Julie and Ajaman at 10:30. Certainly a session not to be missed. And then this afternoon, starting at 2:30, we have Kenny Isabel and Nina Simons, who are the founders of the Pioneers Conference. I wanted to just quickly, for those of you that were not here yesterday, give a brief introduction to Gerardo. He is here on his fourth visit to Louisville, and already have had many people say, if you don't get him here next year, you're in trouble. So he knows that we want him back as soon as we can have him. And I think we're close to convincing him to come. He is really, surely one of the initial group of Westerners to begin to formally practice Tibetan Buddhism. He lived in India for 14 years, the entire time of which he studied within the Tibetan Buddhist community. He is today the South American translator for the Dalai Lama, and also translator of a forthcoming book to be published by Shambhala, which will come out in January, which is a text that was written as a practice manual for Mahamudra practice, which, interesting to the Kentucky connection, was written by the third Kamtrul Rinpoche, who the eighth Kamtrul Rinpoche was photographed by Thomas Merton, and someone that Merton spent time with, as is documented in his Asian journals. So yet another Kentucky connection for us with Gerardo. So Gerardo, if you would please, I'd love to welcome you to the stage, and I know you'll lead us in our initial moment of silence to get things going. Thank you.
So good morning. We're going to do again approach this system of meditation. And yesterday we talked a little bit about what meditation meant in the Buddhist tradition, and how it's not only that it's like the important tool, and many consider it to be like the heart of the whole path of Buddhism. But also it is something which is quite clearly defined at the different stages of meditation, the different instructions that one gets, because it is the way that we really walk on that path of the Dharma, of Buddhism, which is meant to transform ourselves, transform our perception, bringing our perception from this ordinary perception that we have as a human being, and in the initial state, then to bring us to a state of well-being such that it would indicate that we have become a healthy human being. At the beginning, when we start practicing, if we haven't done any kind of a spiritual practice such as this one, contemplative, and we are immersed in our world, especially in the Western cultures and developing countries, because of the system, because of the different pressures that we have, competitiveness, and all kinds of living situations which are quite heavy on us, on our mind, on our emotions. Then there is a sense of fear, the sense of anxiety, and which probably is more intense in such societies than in rural societies far away in the East, in which there weren't many preoccupations except just taking the cow or the sheep around to graze. And so that kind of leaves imprints in our bodies and also in our states of minds that make us feel kind of in general, it's difficult to relax, it's difficult to let go. Our minds are kind of anxious all the time. Somehow it's preoccupied by so many things. We cannot really find a state of stillness and quietness, apart from other things that may be more serious, like traumas and other things, low self-esteem, kind of shyness, and having so many thoughts about oneself, and which, as a result, then we can say that we are not really a healthy human being, because we are conditioned by all these different factors that we have been experiencing since we were born until now. There is a level of sanity, of healthiness, of health that we would need somehow in order to really approach the practice of meditation, so that that practice of meditation may be fruitful. And there are techniques in the Tibetan tradition that approach these different aspects that make us not a very healthy human being and bring us first to a state of health. One of the first practices that we do is the practice that we saw yesterday, in which then we learn, basically, with the objective of calming our minds, then we learn how to deal with our thoughts and our emotions, but with a system which is not really the same as the way that we deal with in traditional psychology in the West and traditional psychoanalysis and so forth, because we don't really care the quality of the thought that comes. We don't judge the thoughts. Any thought that happens is just a thought. And the fact that we don't perceive it as just merely a thought is the reason why the thought has so much power on us. So therefore the whole practice is not intended to cultivate good thoughts and eliminate bad thoughts, because that would entail a judgment on the quality of the thought. But rather, as we saw yesterday, the practice is to try to see the thought as something totally a neutral thing that is happening in our minds. And not getting involved with that thought again and again, but just letting it be and coming back to the support that we have chosen, which could be like a breath. Then, because we're not judging the thought, we don't have any preference, we're starting to cultivate this sense of unbiasedness in relation to thoughts that arise. Any thought is merely a thought, and that is an important step, because then thoughts, they start to lose the grip they have on our attention. The main problem is that it is thoughts which trigger emotions, and emotions is what affects our state of mind, a state of well-being, or a state of dissatisfaction, depression, low self-esteem, anxiety, speed, competitiveness, a feeling of loss, so many things that we experience in our lives which are not pleasant and we don't want to experience. But if we are able to deal with thoughts just like clinically, like that, just merely thought, and not to really be captivated by a thought in a good or a bad sense, then we are finding a sense of freedom, a different freedom than the freedom we have as a concept of freedom. Of course, we are free to do many things, but actually if we are quite critical with ourselves and with our states of being, we see that we are not really free from our emotions, we are not free from our thoughts. And as long as we continue to be conditioned by this, then we cannot speak that we are a free person. And Buddhism has to do very much with becoming free. Because if we don't become free, if we don't find this liberation, then we are not coming out of that round of the circle that perpetuates our situation in that state of lack of freedom, that state of somehow bondage. Maybe bondage is a word that sounds very strong, but actually as long as we are not free from our own phenomena, from our own emotions and our own thoughts, we cannot speak that we are free beings. Probably we don't care so much about that in our culture, because also our traditions, they speak in a different way, and that is not really something that freedom from our emotions and freedom from our thoughts is not something that is even considered to be possible. I heard that in psychology even, then there is no such concept that you can be completely free from attachment and aversion and aggression and jealousy, pride, envy, and so forth. You can manage them, you can reduce them, you can make them pliable, but it's never said that you can completely eradicate them. Whereas in Buddhism, the approach is different. It says these emotions, which are the afflictions, they are afflictions because they don't belong to our natural mind, our natural state of being. So therefore, there's nothing that really intrinsically sustains them, and therefore they can be eradicated. There's nothing there that really and truly exists. They are not part of our nature. When we talk about the Dharma or Buddhism, the Dharma is actually an antidote to eradicate all these afflictions, beginning with the main affliction, which is ignorance, the ignorance of not knowing what one is. But we have to tackle that very deep type of phenomenon that we have, that we don't really know what we are, with techniques that cannot be or are not techniques that must be different from only study and philosophical study or learning. And one of these techniques is the meditation. And meditation then is a way in which we train our minds to become more ordered, function in a much orderly way, reduce the noise that it's actually involved with, and bring it to a state of calm at the beginning. And that is the meditations that we're mainly doing. Yesterday and today also we will do the same type of meditation, except that today maybe we can also approach another type of mind which is a little bit more subtle and which is based not anymore on a support. No longer we need to rest on the support of the breath. There is a quality in our minds that is one of the many factors that we have in our cognizance, but that we don't experience it very well. We have not developed it, but it is within that, and that is one of the purposes of this practice. And this quality is what's called awareness. And when we talk about awareness, then usually we're aware of something, usually aware of an object that is outside, or I'm aware of the way I'm saying something. I'm aware that I really did a lot of harm. But there's always this awareness of something, awareness of it's seemingly an outer object or an outer activity, an outer this or that. But there is a capacity within our minds which is very useful to know our minds, to know ourselves, and also to lead us to total liberation, which is awareness of the mind itself. It is as if the mind is aware of itself. This quality can only be developed through meditation. And it can happen when we have thoughts. It can also happen when we have no thoughts. There are, the mind, when we work or we recognize something, when we know something, sometimes we know something and there is no thought. We just know something. I know this is a glass of water. It doesn't mean that I have to lay over that knowledge, this is a glass of water. I know it is a glass of water. I know this is a gong. I know this is a table. Then there is thinking, and that usually happens after first knowing happens, that first contact with the senses. Then there's the thinking. Oh, this glass of water is almost full. Actually, it would have been better if it were completely full. You know, all this thought process that can come. So there is thinking, and also there is just knowing without thinking. These are two possibilities in our minds. We can know something, or we can just think about something. But the awareness, when we talk about awareness, then awareness means that when we are just knowing, but not thinking, then the mind is aware that it is just not thinking, that it is free of thought. It is knowing, but it is free of thought. And when we are thinking, also that quality of awareness is able to know that we are thinking. And it means that if we develop that quality of awareness, while we're thinking, we may think, but not get caught up with thought. So it is a very important quality that we have to find and we have to cultivate. When we are practicing with a support like we did yesterday, in which then we breathe in and we follow the breath, because the breath actually is representing the present moment. Each instant of inhalation, each instant of exhalation is a present moment, is a moment of now, but in a tangible way. So it's kind of easier because we are used to always take support on thoughts, take support on objects. When we think about something, there's some object that we're taking support on, and therefore it's not so easy at some point to completely release any kind of support. So we use a support. In any case, I mean, when we are distracted, we are getting support in all kinds of concepts, many concepts, or millions of concepts, one after the other. We are not even aware of what is going on. And that is the main problem. Thinking is not a problem. What is a problem is we don't know that we're thinking. So Buddhism always points to that very important aspect that we have to know what's going on. It is called mindfulness. It is also called awareness. It is that presence of mind that is conscious of what's happening at the present moment. It is a very, very important quality to develop. Some teachers say that non-distraction is the path of all the Buddhas of the past. That non-distraction is the path of all the Buddhas that are now becoming enlightened, and non-distraction is also the path of all the Buddhas to come. So it is actually like a totally indispensable factor. When we talk about mindfulness, when we talk about awareness, is something that we really need. If we are going to practice a meditation that is aiming at finding the nature of our being, and also if we are just practicing meditation in order to calm our minds. In both cases, without mindfulness, we cannot even call it meditation. So this factor of awareness, or in a primitive sense, more like mindfulness, or awareness is okay, we can use both words, is something that has to be recovered within us, because it is really something that will give us the freedom. If we are aware, then we can have a choice of not getting involved, or we can have a choice of getting involved with a thought, with an emotion. We are not aware, we don't even know what's going on, and we are taken over by the thought or the emotion that is happening at that time. The first practices that we did with the breath, even though yesterday I didn't point this out to you, but there was some sort of avoidance, because, and that is a little bit kind of related to blocking. We're not really blocking in a gross way, but we do avoid the thought. because we have one thought in which we are concentrating, which is the breath. The breath is the point. The breath is the support. And if a thought arose, then what did we do? The moment we detected the thought, then we came back to the breath. There was something to come back to. That means to say that we avoided that thought. It's not that we welcomed the thought and we just stayed with the thought, even in a kind of aware way. No, we just said we come back to something else, which is the breathing. And that practice can go a long way. It is very fruitful, very important. It is a practice that we have to do at the beginning. We have to rely on a support. Most people, I'm not saying that everybody is the same, but until we quieten our minds, maybe some time passes because it's not so easy. Instructions seem to be very simple. There's no religious anything attached to it. It's just like almost mechanical. You come back again and again. But by doing so, then we become much more aware of our own minds. It happens very often that a person who starts to meditate then comes out of that first practice or second practice and says, this is insane. I have many more thoughts now than what I had before. But actually, it's not that's not the case. Before, there was no instant in which the mind was still, so there was not an opportunity to be aware of the thoughts. So we have the same amount of thoughts. It's only that now we realize how many thoughts we always had. And that is what's called the first kind of stillness. If there is no such a stillness, then we would not even discover how many thoughts we had in the mind. And so these things start to happen when we start with a coarse mind, a mind which is very noisy, a mind that cannot stay still for a single moment. Then we have to resort to some kind of support. It's like a prop. But after some time, and when we develop some sense of stillness, the mind can stay still on the breath. There is no need to continue using the breath as a support. There is also, if you notice, in the practice, if we have the subject being mind and mindfulness, and the object being the breath, when we are practicing with the breath, then the attention is kind of out, right? Because it is the breathing that goes out and the breathing that comes in, but it's kind of like the object in this duality of subject and object. Then the focus is more on the object. And somehow then even though it is a very beneficial type of practice, then the orientation of our attention is still outside. So what happens when we drop the support? We can drop the support when we have experienced some kind of continuity of stillness, even though maybe not so long. That stillness means a state of mind in which there is no thoughts, there is no movement. But then suddenly there is some kind of movement, which is a thought. So we have two possibilities at that point. There can be stillness, absence of thoughts. There can be also movement, which would be a thought, an emotion, of course, a memory, some music that doesn't come out of the mind, or some spark of a thought or whatever. All these things are considered to be movement. Now, there is a third factor which is very important. It's like a triad that works together. The third factor is awareness. It means cognizance. Cognizance is the most important aspect here and in all the practices of meditation. In Buddhism, clarity of mind is highly stressed. It always, we will find, if we have the two factors that would qualify a type of meditation as a good meditation, a positive and fruitful meditation, these two factors are stillness, the mind remaining calm and still, but also clarity. Because clarity is a cognizance. When we talk about clarity, we are talking about lucidity, that quality of mind that knows. And when that quality of mind knows, then we know what's happening at any given moment. When we are talking about our Buddha nature, we talk about the basis of our being, the nature of our reality, then Buddhism is very clear about it. It's that omniscience, is that state of, is a state of wisdom, is a state of transcendent wisdom. Wisdom, cognizance are all of the same kind of substance, of thing. We are not going to find Buddhahood, so to speak, or liberation in stillness. We are going to find it within clarity. That's why clarity is so important. That's one of the reasons we don't close the eyes. As we saw yesterday, eyes and ears and nose and all the sense perceptions have to be open because they're all doors to cognizance, and cognizance is the gateway to wisdom, and wisdom is what our true nature is, transcendent wisdom. So this third quality, this third factor of the triad, we have stillness, we have movement, and then we have this third factor, which is noting or cognizance or awareness also we can call it, which knows when there is stillness and there is absence of thoughts, then we are aware that there is absence of thoughts. And when there is movement, then the mind is aware that there is movement. So, but just being aware that there is a thought doesn't mean that we're avoiding the thought, because we are not saying, okay, I'm aware of the thought, but I'm coming to something. The thought, even though it may be a thought of the past, it's happening in the present moment. And even if a thought is a thought of some speculation on the future, it is also happening in the present moment. Some comment of what's happening in the present moment is also a thought. So any thought that comes is happening in the present moment, so we don't have to avoid anything. There is stillness, and we're aware of stillness. There is a thought, we're aware of the thought. And if we do that, then thoughts become like parts of the meditation. They are no longer kind of obstacles to meditation. They are part of the meditation, because when there is a thought, we are mindful, we are aware. When there is no thought, then we are also mindful and we are conscious of what's happening. So therefore, as long as mindfulness or non-distraction is present, then we are treading the path of all the Buddhas, as we mentioned yesterday. Now, many times we do have like a state of non-thought. We may be in a sauna, kind of without any thought, but we are not aware of that state of non-thought. A baby who's just born has no thought whatsoever. And the mind is very clean, it's very close to natural mind. We could almost say that it's the natural state of mind, almost. But there is no awareness that that is the natural state of mind. So therefore, the baby starts to get all these different inputs and becomes a grown-up like all of us, with all the different aspects that makes us neurosis and all kinds of things. But when we are asleep and we don't have any dreams, again, that is a state in which there are no thoughts, but we are not aware, so it's useless. Here we say there is no thought, there is absence of thought, but we have to be aware, we have to notice that there is no thought. Then non-thought, absence of thoughts becomes part of the practice, becomes part of the meditation. The same happens when there are thoughts. If we are not aware, then it's just the normal way that everybody is. Humans, animals, I don't know animals, they have many thoughts, but humans for sure have many thoughts. And we are always involved in the train of thoughts, which is distraction. That is not meditation. But if when we think, then we're aware of the thought, then that is also part of the meditation. So the most important aspect in this practice is the third aspect, which is awareness. If there is no awareness, if there is no this cognizance of what's going on, we may be like in a sauna with a kind of blank mind, and it's like a stupid state of mind, or we be just kind of in all the reveries, memories and stuff that we usually are into. So that's also not a meditation. So we'll try to cultivate today to at least have a glimpse of what it means to have, we will start first with a meditation taking the breath as a support, like yesterday. And also then we will shift for some short time just to release the support and see what happens. In the practice of meditation, there are two factors that are very important. When we talk about mindfulness, mindfulness is already a word that has a lot of connotations, and people use it in many different contexts, but it has a the connotation of being aware or of being mindful, very, very attentive of what's happening. That is very good. Literally, mindfulness means not to forget. Mindfulness, another way to define mindfulness in Buddhism is not to forget. What are you not forgetting? You're not forgetting the present moment, because that is the object of this meditation. The moment a thought comes and you went with the thought, you forgot the present moment you are with the thought, because the thought is taking you somewhere. But if you, the moment a thought comes, you just see it without losing the present moment. You see the thought as happening in the present moment. The thought will melt away, but you haven't lost awareness or mindfulness of the present moment. And we say you didn't forget the present moment. So the function of mindfulness is not to allow our attention to leave the object of meditation. But there is another factor which is called cognizance, or it's called like knowing. And this word knowing, which is awareness, is that which knows a much wider aspect of the whole situation that is happening, the meditation. Is that which knows that there is a sound happening, and that knows whether the mind was diverted by the sound or just the sound was recognized and nothing happened. It knows when you slump, when you lose your posture. It knows when your mind got distracted, and at some point, so, oh no, I am distracted, and then brings back the mind. And then mindfulness takes over and prevents it from being distracted again. So these two work together, and they have a very good relationship if they are together. When mindfulness is good, the other one is also good. A mindfulness that lacks this other aspect of attention, of awareness, which gives it a much more panoramic kind of amplitude, then that is what we know as concentration. And if we lack this other aspect, and we are only mindful, only concentrated, then we start to become absorbed by the object. And there are many meditations, like the dhyana meditations, in which the whole purpose is to become totally absorbed. So much so that even the senses cease to function and you don't perceive. You're so absorbed in the object, you're so concentrated, that then someone comes around, calls you by the name, and you don't even listen. But that's not our practice. Our practice is much more light. We have to be aware of everything that happens, but still follow what's happening in the present moment. So we can start the practice, and these factors have to be present. Let's try to be mindful for the duration of the practice, and also, if possible, after the practice as well. So you're all sitting in a chair, so the other points of the posture, maybe we can go through, except for the legs. The main aspect of the posture is always the back. It should be very, very straight. The hands can go on the knees, and the shoulders are spread a little bit, not too much, but like they prevent this slump, because that creates tension, and the whole purpose is to be quite relaxed. Then the chin falls down a little bit, and lips and teeth, they have a slight opening in between. They are not really touching it. And the eyes are also open. That we saw yesterday, that's a characteristic of the Buddhist meditation. Even if that is very difficult, well, meditate with eyes closed, but eventually try to open them. But we limit the vision by kind of letting the gaze fall at about 1 yard away from the body. So that's the posture, and try to keep still. Of course, if you have to move, there's no problem. It's not like in Zen that someone will come and bang you on the back. Here, I mean, if you have to move, no problem. Just move a little bit and come back to the meditation. And so now let's start to focus on the breath. Whenever there is a thought, as soon as there is a thought, or the earliest we can do it, then we have to detect that there is a thought. And the moment that we detect it, then we have to have the determination not to stick with the thought and keep on the train, but back immediately to the breath. Immediate, as soon as thought, back to the breath, again and again. This coming back again and again gives us a lot of knowledge and awareness of what's happening in our mind and strengthens mindfulness, strengthens the sense of presence. Otherwise, it will always be kind of wishy-washy. It would never really work. So we have to be quite determined in not to allow ourselves to settle into any thought that comes. There's nothing wrong with having thoughts. That will happen. Thoughts, if we develop strength of presence, the thoughts will diminish by themselves. It's not that we particularly want to block them or anything. They will just kind of become less and less as we practice and we develop mindfulness. So let's start to do this breath. First, just relax. Find yourself comfortable within the body. And also watch your mind. Not the breath, but just watch your mind that it's relaxed. There's nothing really that we have to think about. This half hour, we're destined to do this. So let's do it as full as possible. And now, in that state of a mind that is quite loose, then slowly we start to pay attention to the breath. It's the normal breath that we always have. When we inhale, let's follow the breath, how it comes in through the nostrils, goes into the body, and comes down. We feel it in the belly. And then it comes out. And all the time our attention is in that in and out movement of the breath. And when it comes out, just naturally, when the body needs to breathe, then you breathe in again, and we follow the same. Remember, if a thought comes, no problem, but don't get involved with it. Just let it be. Come back to the breath. Disengage yourself from the thought process. We are always engaged. Don't be too keen to catch every single thought, because that will make your minds very tight. And if your mind becomes tight, your attention becomes too tight, then thoughts will start to proliferate more. So, on the contrary, if you're too loose, then you will lose track of the thoughts, and clarity will also subside. Eventually, you will be without thoughts, but also kind of sleepy, and that is no good. Attention should be neither too tight nor too loose. That's a very important key point. And this is something that we can only find by ourselves. If you find it's easier to count, you can count up to 7 and then rest a little bit. Break the meditation for a few seconds, 20 seconds maybe, and then resume the meditation again, counting up to 7, so that you have short periods many times in the greater period of meditation. That is also very useful. Now let go of the breath. Don't pay attention to the breath. Just let the mind watch itself. Now the mind is more oriented to the subject, not to the object. It's just watching itself. It's watching its own cognizance. If there is stillness, that's fine. And if there is a thought, you just notice there is a thought. That's all we have to do. If you find that it's not so easy, then go back to attention on the breath. Presence should be light, but there, still, it should be there. It shouldn't be very intense. Rather, it's like the analogy is like a herdsman, a shepherd who watches over his sheep from the distance, but it's not really totally concentrated on each and every sheep he has, but he watches over everything in a very relaxed way. So if a thought comes, you just let it, you notice and just let go. The thought will resolve by itself. We don't particularly want to develop stillness deliberately. If it develops, it will do so by itself. We don't have much preference between stillness or movement. Whatever happens, in whichever our mind at that point, however it manifests, then that's what we have to notice. any questions? Maybe we can light up the hall. I cannot see anybody.
My mind was off solving a problem and heard you say something about seven.
Number 7 counts, you mean?
Yeah, what was that?
That is, some people find it easier at the beginning to follow the breath if at the same time they keep a count on the breath. So in inhaling, exhaling, and automatically the mind says 1, and again 2, up to 7. It could be up to 3, 4. 7 is quite nice. It's neither too long nor too short a time. So probably we're able to keep better quality of our attention in a short period. Otherwise, if someone doesn't have a earlier practice and tries to set up to do half an hour, at the beginning maybe they will have clarity, maybe the mind is also quite still, but soon after it will start to go into the habitual kind of patterns and thoughts and so forth, and will lose the mindfulness. It will become more difficult to keep the presence of mindfulness all the time. So therefore it is said short periods, but many short periods is more beneficial than a longer period, only 1. 7 is an arbitrary number. It doesn't have anything mystical about it. Although there have been so many 7 this and 11 that, but in this case it's just a number. You can use also 6, no problem.
Could you, excuse me, could you elaborate a little bit about the concept of handicap?
The concept of?
Handicap, either physically or mentally,
Yeah.
is how it's perceived in the Buddhist culture.
Physical handicap, it's not considered to be such a big problem because, of course, that would prevent the person to practice all the tantric yoga practices that you do with the body, like pranayama and different yoga exercises and postures and so forth. But if the person is able to sit with the back straight, then they can do practically any other type of meditation. Now, mental handicap is a little bit more difficult because of the clarity of mind and it depends a little bit, like one of the conditions in order to progress in the path, one of the conditions is that one has to have some sense of clarity and discernment, correct discernment in the mind has to be there. Otherwise, if there is a mental handicap, there are many kinds of mental handicaps, so it's difficult to exactly say. But a person who is very, has a really a mental disease like schizophrenia and stuff like that, it's very difficult for these people to find any sense of reality. They change senses of reality all the time, and it's very difficult for them even to understand something that would point to the nature of reality as it is and so forth. So it is said that mental handicap would be a more serious problem. It's not that one cannot practice, but it is just a handicap, of course. I mean, it will not be the same as when you have all your senses lucid, yeah.
Thank you, Gerardo. Up here. In other traditions, I've learned to observe myself from outside, from an outer vantage point. So when you tell us to observe our mind, where's that vantage point coming from? Is it from outside the body, or is it from within the body?
If the attention is from outside, you mean? Or
Yes. So that you're observing your body and your mind together. Are we also looking at our body or just our mind, or just our thoughts?
no. Well, it depends on the practice you do. There is initial practices that develop mindfulness. One of them is called the 4 applications of mindfulness. That is widely practiced in the Vipassana tradition, especially in some paths of Buddhism, like the Theravada path. Then that is the main practice. No? And 4 applications of mindfulness. The first one is mindfulness applied on the body. So then it's not coming outside. It's all the mind. The mind is inside, right? If you really look for it, you don't even find it inside, outside, but that would be the absolute mind. But in any case, there's no mind outside our body. That is, wherever we carry our body, then we carry our minds, right? If I want to see what's happening in the street now, I have to take my body out to see what's happening in the street. So everything is happening within this body. But then the first practice is that you focus on the body. Just have a sense of the whole body. Then the second is the mindfulness on sensations. Then you focus on the sensations of the body. If there is some pain, if there is some itching, if there is something, then you just watch it and be mindful of that. You don't do anything to that, and so forth. And then you go into mindfulness of mind, which is thoughts and emotions. Finally, you go into mindfulness of the mental stability, of calmness of this practice. So that is one approach. In our approach, what we saw right now, remember that there were 2 factors. One is the factor of mindfulness, which is not leaving the object. No? That a factor that prevents the forgetfulness. No? It prevents the mind from leaving the object. But the other factor was the factor of awareness. And that factor of awareness is the one that detects whether the body is already slumping or to the right, to the left, or is aching or whatever. It is that factor of awareness which notices. So within that, we have, including within that, not only what's happening with the mind, if it gets distracted or not, if it becomes dull and needs to have reinvigorate a little bit of clarity or not, all that is detected by knowing or awareness. And also, of course, the body and also the 5 senses which operate through the senses of the body. So it's like a general command, like a central headquarters of cognizance are happening there. It just knows everything and takes the right decision. And that is part of clarity. Mindfulness, we cannot separate so much. And in some traditions, they mix these 2 together because they're really like twins, They work together very well. So if one is present, the other one should also be there. If the other one is not there, then the other one wouldn't be there. And but if, in our case, like we could have concentration. I don't know if that would be called mindfulness as the way we are defining it. What I mean, when we say concentration alone, a person can be completely absorbed by the developing a computer program. Like you see these kids, playing and completely absorbed into that, and they don't notice what's going around. Everything else kind of ceases to come into that picture. That is concentration. That also is quite stressing in the mind. But if there is this factor of knowing, of awareness, then nothing becomes too serious, nothing becomes too heavy. So you can practice a long time and you will not get exhausted.
Thanks.
Microphone.
When you are still, relatively still, and then you become aware or distracted by stress points in the body, which are ongoing, is it, and you've shifted away from focusing on the breath, you're just still, can you then begin to focus, breathe into the stress point with an effort to make it go away, feel better? I become more aware of stress points that I can't get rid of.
Well, there is a way, as I mentioned in these 4 applications of mindfulness. You don't do anything to the itching. In Zen, they're very strict on that. If you have a pain, you can sit hours, with your Vajra position like this, 45 minutes. If you move, someone comes and bangs you. If you're falling asleep, someone comes and bangs you. But Tibetan Buddhism is not so heavy on that. And there is a way, if you're capable of that, and it doesn't produce more thoughts, and you can guide your attention to the stress in the body, like a pain or something. There is a physical pain, but because of our minds, it becomes enhanced and it becomes out of proportion. That is some factor that we lay over that basic physical pain. We can reduce that by just focusing mindfulness on the pain. And if you have that strength, then the pain will just be there, but it will not have all these repercussions, you know, in the way it affects you. And then you're not losing the practice. But if that is not so easy, and then you start to struggle, you know, oh, this pain is too much, but I will not move because I was told I shouldn't move, you know, this kind of thing. Then that creates so many thoughts. It's better just to move a little bit, and then it's easier. I mean, you move a little bit and you keep on going, you know, and then you solve so much struggle and thoughts that can come and everything. That is a very particular way of practicing that I received from my teachers. I don't know if it's in the mainstream and in the books, but it helps me quite a lot, yeah.
Hi. When you said there is a triad of stillness and movement and awareness, I wanted to hear about how to take that into my daily life activities, if that's appropriate to talk about. Thank you.
It's important to continue with a sense of presence during our daily life, because as we saw yesterday, I mentioned, we spend so many more hours during our everyday life than the moments that we assign to meditation. And let alone all the hours of sleep that we are totally unconscious of what's going on there. There are practices in Buddhism that teach us how to be aware also during sleep and to have lucid dreams in which you know that you're dreaming, but you're not waking up, and then you work with the dreams. That's ideal. I mean, that's also possible. But then during the daytime, a basic sense, not really so much connected about movement and stillness, because it's very difficult to be still during the everyday life. I mean, you will have mostly movement there. You have to talk, you have to cook, you have to do something. The mind will not, this triad really is more intended to the cushion practice, because then you have the conditions in which the mind can be quiet, can be still. It doesn't have to decide anything. You've cut off all kinds of activities. So you are allowing a space for the mind to just find its own sense of stillness. But in everyday life, that is very, very difficult. But what can continue is the sense of awareness, the third factor. And that means to say that you're present in things that you're doing. You're washing, then you have attention in what you do. Instead of when you wash, you're thinking, oh, as soon as I finish here, I will go to Macy's because I have to buy this and that, you know, just anything like that. I'm washing, look at there's one way, which is like really being very attentive to whatever you're doing. That's one way. Another way is that you have experienced the meditative state. You know how the mind is calm because you've practiced, you know, you've been practicing some time, then you know that when you sit in meditation, you know the taste of what that meditative state is. That's presence of that present moment. You know how it is. You can recognize that. So in everyday life, then suddenly you realize, oh, I'm totally dispersed. And you flash back to that state. And you stay. You kind of pause a little bit. And then the mind will rest in that space, maybe 2, 3, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, not more. And then again, you will get involved. And again, you will realize, oh, I'm distracted, and come back. So that would be, again, the thing of short moments many times. By developing that, then you become much more familiar with that state, even during your everyday practice, everyday activities, without having to deliberately, you know, the other, you know, being so, when you walk, you know, there's a walking meditation, but no, how can you walk? Walking meditation is very slow, you know, when the toe, you know, touches, then you're aware, when then it comes down, then the heel, and then the next step and everything. If you have to walk 2 blocks, it will take like 2 hours, you know, so you lose your job, you lose everything. So then sometimes it's not so applicable. But then this flashback is quite another way, which is very good. And actually, this second way is quite good. If one gets, first of all, because we have to have determination. If we don't have the determination to be mindful of during the daytime, that means to say that we realize we're distracted, then maybe in the whole day we will realize one time, But if we are really determined to come back and flash back, then maybe 3 times, 5 times, 7 times, after a month, maybe 10 times, and then you're flashing back all the time. You're not bothering anyone. You're not interrupting even your job. You're not doing anything. It's really very practical. And at present now, we would be back on this meditative state of stillness that we found. But once the mind finds its own nature, and then it starts to function from the nature of mind, then then you get distracted from the nature of mind, not from this mere stillness and peace that we have found. You found the nature of mind. That means you had a glimpse of your Buddha nature, of the state of transcendence, of this state which is our essence. And so if you already are quite accustomed to flashing back, you will flash back to that nature of mind. And many short moments then will make you familiar to that continuity of the nature of mind. It's like, the analogy is like rain falling on a leaking roof. So there are leaks, but if you put a bucket, it's a drop at a time, but then it will fill the bucket. It's a little bit like that. So that's another way that you can integrate a little bit into the regular life. The key is to keep mindful, to be attentive, it needs a lot of work, unfortunately.
Gerardo, sorry for interrupting,
Sorry,
but the good news is we can continue this conversation tomorrow morning. And for those of you that didn't know, we are luckily going to have a double session tomorrow that's not listed on your schedule. So know that we'll begin as scheduled at 9 o'clock, but we'll continue for 2 hours, not just one. So please do come tomorrow morning and tell your friends, and we'll be back in just 15 minutes from now for our next program. And huge thanks to you, Gerardo, for this wonderful session. Thank you so much.
She